So let's talk about how functions are structured. So the way you write a function, you have to provide a return type. So that'll be something like int, bool, string, uh, float, different. It could be char, various kinds of variables that we've seen. The function is going to return something. You then give your function a name. So you could have sqrt for square root. Um, you could have double for something that multiplies things by 2. You could have a function draw, and then it'll like take in coordinates of points and like draw them on a graph or something. But anyway, you're going to have a name of a function. Inside parentheses, you will put the parameters that go into the function. And then afterwards, you have the squiggly braces. And then inside those braces will be the body of the function. And that's the meat of what the function actually does. So for instance, you could do a function that counts words in a string. If we're counting things, that means that's going to be an integer. That's a number. So like the return type would be an int. The name of the function, if we're counting words, why don't we call it word count? Imagine that. And then the input, the kind of object would be a string. And then we will give the string a name. We'll just call it string to count, str to count. And then we won't fill in the details just yet, but then in braces after that, you would then put in how you would actually count words in a string. This part here, everything basically that's not the braces with the actual lines of code inside it, that is called the function header. So to start with, we're just going to talk about kind of what the header does. So you have arguments. Those are things that are going into a function. So when you call a function, that's what you're putting into it. The parameters are values that are inside of the function. And so what you do is you take an argument and you pass it to fill the arguments, basically fill in the empty boxes of the parameters. So like the square root function that I called, the way it's written is probably like square root x, and then I have to put in like the number 2 or the number 18 or whatever, and that'll go in that'll be the argument for that parameter. And what the function does is that does stuff to that parameter to figure out what I want to know. And so the action is called passing. You're going to pass an argument to a parameter in a function. So there are functions that can take one parameter, no parameters, or multiple parameters. So for instance, square root takes 1. You do square root of 2. If you're going to open a file, you would say like myfile.open, tell it which file you're going to open, and then tell it that you're outputting the data. So with file streams like this one here, you have to tell it the file to do and then tell it where to put that information. We saw another example also of a two argument function. When you pulled a substring, you told it where to start in the string and then how many characters to pull out of the string. So like we started at position 7 and then took 8 characters starting at that point. You can have other functions that take no parameters at all. So like the close function, you just do my file close and it closes it and you're done. Let's see. So the function header is going to tell the compiler how many parameters it should expect to see. You separate the parameters by commas. So if we're going to count the number of times a word appears in a long string, that's going to be 2 parameters. We're going to give it the string that we want, and then provide it with the string we want to find. So if we were going to count the occurrences of the word the, for instance, and we uploaded like the text of like, I don't know, a whole book or something, we could then count how many times the word the appears in that book. So what we would do, we give the return type, which is an integer. That's the kind of output that we're going to have. We're going to call this, the name of this function, count occur. How many times does this happen? The first parameter will be a string, and we'll call it the string to find. So I'm going to look for the, and then we're going to do another string, which will be the string to search. So that'll be like the entire text of like Moby Dick or something. So I'm going to look for the word the, and then give it a string that's like the entire novel Moby Dick, which is like a really long, it's a long book, let's just say. Let's see. We can also write a function that will get a number from the user and then display it. So we could have int get guess. So we're going to get a number, so the output is an integer, and we're going to get a guess. That doesn't actually require a parameter because we're just going to tell the user in this function, like, hey, bro, give me a number. And then they'll type in a number, and that's it. Usually functions are pretty short and sweet. And then what computer programmers tend to do is call lots of functions and kind of mix them and match them in different ways and have functions that do sort of short, sweet, distinct tasks. And then if you have a team of people, you know, you'll have somebody working on the function and then somebody working at like the higher level of like what the stuff's supposed to do. There are some functions that don't actually return anything, and those are called voids. So the return type is a void, and that basically means we're going to call this function, but it's not actually going to return anything. It's not going to spit back out anything. So a return in a function replaces the argument passed in the function call. So the output is just what you're going to see in spite of the arguments that are passed. So for instance, you could have a function that's just going to print a greeting. You know, you could have a function void print greeting, and all it does is it just outputs the text like how you doing there, bro? And then that's it. That's all it does. In fact, let's see that in action here. So we should need this. So like we could do a void and then do print greet, no parameters, do this, do some braces there, and then we're just going to do cout. And those are pointed backwards. I always mix that up. So you do cout. How's it going there, bro? And then L. And then you can, in your main program, do print greet. And then if you're going to do this all the time, let's see if it works without the parentheses. Let's just see what happens. Okay. Apparently that was not what I was hoping for. So let's try this. Yeah, so how's it going there, bro? So anyway, this, it doesn't return anything. It just outputs some text, and there's no like return clause. It doesn't return a new number. Like if I ask for 2, it doesn't return some new value. It prints out the text and it's done. It doesn't return a value that I'm going to do something with later. So ways you could, different kinds of return types you could have. So are your measurements in the danger zone? That will be a bool for like true or false. So we fly into the danger zone. Anyway, I don't know why I did that. I should not sing. Let's see. Warning messages for danger. So you could just do a void and be like you guys are dangerous, you know, like you know, Top Gun's like a really old movie now. You probably have no clue what I'm talking about. Let's see. You could compute the dosage giving an agent or a weight. So that would be like a number. So your return type would be a float or a double, maybe. It'll probably be a decimal. Um, a function that gets an address from a file, that would be a string. If you want an address, that's going to be text. Yes, so that would be a string. So different kinds of return types. You could have different kinds of functions here, you know, how long until the next leap year. You could do an integer, days to leap day, have an integer for the current day, an integer for the month, an integer for the year. And then that would just be the header. And then you'd like fill in the gory details later. But in a program, functions are defined before they're called. So kind of like I did up here, before int main, the actual main program, I put the function first. And so that's kind of standard practice. You're going to define the functions prior to the main program when you would then presumably call them. When a program comes across a function call, it's going to match it to the function with the name and the corresponding parameters. And so strictly speaking, it's just going to look for the header. And often what a library will do, they will list all the function headers, and then actually the bodies of the functions are often actually stored somewhere else. So if you're actually able to open up and look at a library like IOStream or CMath, what you would probably actually see would just be nothing but a whole bunch of headings, and then the actual code for what those functions do, the bodies, those would be stored somewhere else.